What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here, and this is NCIS Season 17, Episode 4, Someone Else's Shoes. So, apologies if I sound a little stopped up. I've not been feeling great over the past week or so. I don't exactly know why. I mean, I guess the weather has been changing a lot, so my sinuses don't like that. But it's also why, I've missed a few days of uploading recently. But yeah, so this episode, though, it was kind of hard for me to get into it, and part of that might be because I was watching it last night, and I just got to a point where one of the ads started on Paramount Plus, and it would not play the ad. Like, it would do about half a second and then wait a minute or half a minute and then another half a second, then half a minute and then another half a second. I mean, these ads are like at least three ads at least 30 seconds long. So the fact that it was taking that long, I'm just like, I'm tired already. I'm just going to turn it off for tonight and be done. So I come back to it this morning and watch the rest of the episode. I was only like halfway done at the time. So maybe that had something to do with it, just that frustration of, God, these ads are taking forever to play, the fact that there are ads to begin with. But there's just a lot about this episode that typically for NCIS works. Like, the jokes typically work pretty well. I find myself laughing at a lot of them. I think the chemistry with the team, there's something about the way they bounce off of each other that I feel like most of the time gets me laughing. And I wasn't laughing at this episode. There were a lot of jokes that fell flat. I felt like it wasn't as funny. I don't know what it was. I don't know if something changed about this episode, if the writing wasn't as strong, or if it's not normally strong, but I am just in a better mood when I watch it most of the time. And I just haven't been because between the sickness or whatever I'm going through, and then also, dealing with the stop starting ads, maybe I'm just not in as good of a mood, so I'm not finding the jokes as funny. But yeah, there's a lot. All of this stuff with the team having to work down in the lower area, all the jokes that came out of that. Casey, again, is still just, it comes off as somebody trying to be funny, and she's not. A lot of the jokes that the team were making amongst each other, there's one early on that I remember from last night that I'm just like, it's not funny. And it's Torres, like, oh yeah, he's the chosen one, talking about Jimmy, and he comes up, hey, did he call me a chosen one? I paid him $10 to call me the chosen one. Like, okay, haha, that's funny? I don't know. It felt like the writing was writing more for a sitcom, and this show is not a sitcom. It's a crime show that's got a lot of comedy to it, but it's not supposed to be sitcom-y, like, oh, boom, boom, with a pause for a laugh track almost. It was just stupid sometimes. So I don't know what was going on in this episode, but it really, a lot of the jokes, the humor didn't click with me. And then the case itself had potential to be interesting, but it fell into, unfortunately, the huge trap that a lot of shows fall into, which is it got too caught up in its message and its morals and preaching, so it really took away from the case itself. Because you look at the case as a whole, pretty interesting setup. A horse rides into a cemetery, Arlington Cemetery no less, with just feet in boots. That's it. Like, that's a very intriguing setup, and it had me going for a lot of it. I was like, okay, I want to know more. But then when you find out, oh, it's about these veterans that are homeless, and yes, I mean, it's a very important message because it is a problem. I've heard a few stories about it. I don't know a whole lot about it, unfortunately, but I do know it is a problem, and it is good to get people talking about it. However, when you take these long pauses from the case itself, which is what your show is supposed to be about, to have these long, drawn-out, preachy conversations, it just takes me out of it. I'm like, this is supposed to be a TV show where you kind of escape from reality, you enjoy the crime and solving the crime and trying to figure out what's going on. You don't want to sit here and be bashed over the head with the moral of like, oh, veterans should be treated better. We need a better system. We need better laws. It's too much most of the time in a lot of these shows. They don't know how to handle telling a good message while incorporating it well into a story, so they either do one or the other. They either don't really have much of a message, it's just focused on telling a fun story, or they put all story aside, all case aside, and focus so much on the message that what could have been a fairly interesting case just gets lost. So yeah, it's frustrating for me because I'm just like, I come here to watch a show. I don't come here to be bashed over the head. So could you please get back to that? And then on top of that, again, without any of the jokes really working that well, it didn't feel like that great of an episode. Um, so yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I'm trying to figure out what's going on with Vance as well. Like it's hard to tell if he's being stern, if he's being, okay, you guys need to pay for what you did. You need to be punished for your actions. You can't just go around and do whatever and hide secrets from me, even if it was for a good cause. So there are consequences. It feels like he's kind of being stern, but he's also not. At the end, he comes and he's like, I think, I'll handle this myself. Okay, so does that mean you're going to punish them yourself, or does that mean you're just like, you know what, they're not actually dealing with this punishment, so it's pointless to keep him down here, so let's just get him out. I don't know. Maybe we'll see what's going to happen in the next couple episodes. Maybe there actually will be some consequences that we'll see. But for the moment, it just kind of feels like these consequences are more just kind of jokes off to the side. And I feel like this should be something a bit more like, yes, they did keep secrets. This should be a bigger deal. This should be something where, no, they should have some consequences for their actions. Now, not necessarily, like Gibbs was saying at the beginning of this episode, the case should come first. They should still be out there solving the case. But there should be something that they have to deal with that is a consequence for, hey, you can't color outside the lines like this because it's not okay. But it's just kind of true, like, oh, haha, they did it, and Vance is saying he's going to be hard on them, and now they're dealing with this thing down there. They can't have phones, but they still have their phones out. Oh, are they going to get away with it? I don't know. I don't like it. It's not fun. It's not enjoyable, and it doesn't feel very realistic either. And not that this show has often been super realistic, but it should be based on a bit more realism than what we saw in this episode, which felt, again, much more like a sitcom. Like, honestly, I would expect to see a lot of what I saw on a show like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, because that's a sitcom show. That's a show that's meant to be taken hilariously, not with a bit of reality to it. So I don't know. It's not a good start for these first 3 episodes. But on to the next one. I'll see you there. Now, episode 5? 5. Wide Awake, which I'm clearly not right now. Another one that, very similar to the last episode, had the potential to be very interesting with the concept that it presented, but kind of just got lost in it and decided to go kind of safe with it. Because the idea that a hypnotist or a hypnotherapist could essentially hypnotize somebody and not necessarily get them to do something they wouldn't do, but actually get them to do something they would do, just alter their perception of what it looks like. So like they were talking about, she goes in to shoot Joe Cortez, but in her mind she thinks she's defending herself from an attack of some sort. I feel like especially in a show like this where, she was in the Marines, so clearly she's probably seen at least a little bit of combat, I would assume. There's a very good chance that you could work that around where a hypnotherapist could step in and say, all right, you're back at the war, and essentially convince her that Joe Cortez is the enemy and shoot him. Like, I feel like there would be a very interesting conundrum in that situation where, yes, she still pulled the trigger, but is she really at fault? Is this something she normally would have done in this situation, or is it because this hypnotherapist essentially altered her perception of reality and convinced her she was back in the war, and so her shooting him was not really her fault? It's kind of an interesting topic of conversation, but the problem is, because I know how shows like this work, I kind of figured that wasn't going to be the case. There have been many shows that do stuff like this. I think of like this one, Criminal Minds, I think also had a few episodes like that where they had some interesting concept, and then by the end of it, it's like, actually, we're going to push that aside and go with the safe answer. Bones, I think, was especially guilty of it later on, where they would have these very intricate things where, oh, well, they're connected to this dangerous thing, or they're connected to this thing which would be worth killing over. And in the end, you find out they just had, it was something to do with an affair. Nothing to do with all this stuff. I don't know why shows like this tend to do that, where it's just, we're going to play it safe. We're not going to tackle this very complex thinking problem. It's just, we're just going to say, okay, a guy framed her. And that's honestly, from the beginning, that's kind of what I assumed was going to happen. As back and forth as they were going, like, is she trying to play NCIS? Is she trying to make them think, oh, no, he just hypnotized me and that's why I did it? Or is it he actually did hypnotize her and alter her perception? It was so back and forth, back and forth. I'm like, okay, well, it's going to be neither then, which means somebody went in and shot him and then framed her by putting her fingerprints on the gun. It's exactly what happened. So, yeah, in that sense, I'm a little disappointed just because it would have been very interesting. Especially, I do like scenarios like what they presented here, where it's hard to know who to trust. I mean, the hypnotherapist didn't seem like the nicest guy. You know, when they first go and see him, he's like, don't let the door hit you on your way out. So clearly, he's kind of a jerk. But from her point of view, I mean, maybe he did something to upset her, so she's just trying to get back at him by blaming him for everything. It would have been kind of an interesting who do you believe scenario, but that's not what they wanted to do. They just wanted to make you think that that's what it was all about. It was the hypnotherapy that caused her to do it, when in reality it was another guy that just framed her for it by making it seem like, oh, she did it in her sleep. So, yeah, I don't know. Little frustrated in that sense. The jokes in this one did land a little bit more. The whole who's gonna get hypnotized, who's gonna get put under, and the fact that Torres is the one. I mean, I expected it, but it was still pretty funny how it was handled, and Ellie sort of giving him a few jokes throughout the episode were also it made me laugh. You know, it's something that I needed because the last episode didn't really make me laugh. So this one giving me some laughs, giving me some moments of, you know, McGee, wait, so Mr. Muscle Man put a donut in his mouth and chewed it. Like that, those scenes did make me laugh. And I think a lot of it is much more character focused. And I feel like that we didn't get a whole lot of that in the last episode. Casey is still just annoying. And I feel like until that changes, I'm not even going to really mention her. And until she does something that's phenomenally bad or better than where she is, just know my opinion of Casey right now is I just don't like her. I don't like her character. I don't like her acting. I don't like anything about what they're doing with her right now because she's just not being very well handled. And I don't know. If you were going to replace Abby, you needed to get somebody in that was so different from her. But instead what you did, you got another girl who's just as energetic and quirky, but her energetic and quirkiness is not as funny as Abby's was, because whether it's the writing, whether it's directing, whether it's the acting, something is not working with Casey, and it's never, anytime she pops up, I'm kind of gritting my teeth and just bearing her scenes, and I shouldn't feel like that, you know? With Jimmy, he's not always funny. Like, some of his scenes, I'm just kind of like, okay, whatever, it was just there, but I'm never like, oh, Jimmy. And he does actually occasionally have some funny scenes. With Casey, she's never funny, and it always kind of, it's always kind of cringy to watch her. So I hope something changes with her, because I don't want to hate her. I don't want to hate the new girl, but they've not done anything to convince me otherwise. So we'll see what happens. But for right now, that's my opinion on her. The final thing is, well, actually, no, there were two things. One was just kind of here and gone. McGee apparently found some info about the drug dealer who gave Fornell's daughter stuff. And I do vaguely remember that because I did rewatch a couple of my reviews from last season just to remind myself what happened last year. Last season, I mean. So I don't know if that's going to be a prevailing story throughout the season, but it was only like one scene where he popped in and said, hey, I found this, and Gibbs just said, give it to the DEA. And then the other thing is this kid that's living across from Gibbs now. I don't really know what they're setting up there. The mom seems a little too young for him, so I don't know if they're trying to set up a romance. There were definitely a couple scenes where that's what I was feeling like they were trying to show me, but she seems a little too young. Like, he, in my opinion, he looks like he's in his maybe early 70s, late 60s, something like that. She looks maybe late 40s, early 50s. So I feel like I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying, obviously age is just a number when you get up to that point, but it still feels a little weird. Still, I don't really see that as a relationship. If she were like a little bit older, maybe. I don't know. We'll see what they're going to do with that. It was sweet to see those scenes with him trying to teach the kid how to throw a baseball. Because, I don't know, he does seem sort of like that fatherly figure to every kid. You know, he seems like he would make a good role model for a kid. So I don't know what they're going to do with that. It just sort of popped up. It was very random for sure. But it was nice. It was okay. Just the only problem I had with it was I don't really see that as a romantic thing, and that's what they seem like they were trying to show me. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I just read the scenes wrong, and it's actually just supposed to be, oh, he's just gonna start helping this family, and he's gonna be nice to him and stuff. And there's nothing romantic there. It's just like, oh, her kid now has a father figure to look up to. Like that's, I don't know. We'll see what happens there. But yeah, that's it for this episode. So on to the next one. See you there. And now episode 6, Institutionalized. Finally got an episode learning more about Casey, but I don't know. Because of how frustrating she and Torres were both being in this episode, it's really hard for me to grab onto. Just because, I mean, from her point of view, I get that she's worried about her friend. Totally understand that. However, the way she's going at the team and attacking them, it's not helpful. It doesn't help to just be like, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? Why aren't you doing enough? You gotta do more. You gotta do more. Why don't you go and try to do some stuff instead of wasting everybody's time yelling at them? Why don't you go down to your lab and try to find something to help instead of just antagonizing everybody and telling them why they're terrible people and why, oh, he's just marginalized and he's just a product of a bad system. He's not actually a bad guy. Well, why don't you go prove it then? And then Torres on the flip side, I mean, he was being so antagonistical in this episode needlessly. He's shown that at times he can be a little uncaring, maybe a little aloof to other people's feelings, but this was just him being a jerk in this episode. I mean, just straight up, oh, he's not a bad guy? Oh, well, let me just show you actually what he really is like. And then later on, I mean, Gibbs, are we really doing this because we think he's innocent, or are we just doing this for Casey? What's the problem with looking into it more for Casey? Why wouldn't you want to help out a member of the team? Like, it's just, he was being overly a jerk, and she was being overly like, oh, he's definitely innocent. I just know he is, even though there's all this evidence. It's like the two polar extreme opposites that were both very frustrating in this episode to me. The story itself, I mean, it was fine. I'm glad they didn't spend all this time talking about, I mean, granted, they did spend a lot of time talking about him and how the system is broken, all this, but I was really worried they're just going to make it, oh, it's just because he's black. That's the only reason he got locked up, because I've seen other shows do it. Thankfully, it was more just, because of the people he ran with, which is part of the problem. There do need to be changes in home, in these houses, so that these kids don't feel like they need to get into these dangerous situations. And a lot of that comes down to political stuff that I won't be getting into, because yeah, there's some issues that need to be resolved that make it very easy for that lifestyle to be commonplace. But yeah, they didn't really hammer home, like, the whole veteran thing a couple episodes ago, that was just beating you over the head constantly throughout the episode, pausing to talk, long conversations about it. This one was just the one at the beginning where, Torres brings up his past rap sheets in case she's just like, oh, well, actually, let me tell you, the system is set up to where this was just fireworks and that was a charge and he was put back in prison. This was just one other small little thing. It's like, yeah, sometimes that does happen, but making his case suddenly relate to all of them, it's not really how it works. Now, granted, why doesn't the system set up to where people get out and they are rehabilitated, or they don't go back into lifestyle because they don't want to go back to prison? Why isn't that a thing? Like, that's something that probably should have been talked about a bit more. But no, I mean, as far as her friend though, he was perfectly fine. Acting was a little flat, and I think it was just the facial expressions for me didn't really, I guess, show, like the scene where he and Casey are talking in the prison and she's just called him out on his lie. Like, you could hear his voice was breaking and he sounded convincing, but then you look at him and he's sitting there like this. And Casey, I just don't know if you trust me. And I'm just like, I mean, listening to you, yeah, I believe you. Looking at you, you look like, somebody just told you that this long, complicated math problem, and you're just sitting there trying to figure it out, and you're just like, oh, dang. I don't know if I can get this one. So, yeah, I don't know. These 3 episodes, they weren't terrible. And honestly, I don't think there's really ever been a terrible... Okay, shouldn't say that. There's probably been a few. But, I mean, NCIS, it's just one of those shows that, yeah, there's some stuff, if you really think about it, and if you really try to dig into it and think about it logically, or try to dig into what's being said, yeah, I can get a little, oh, that's kind of dumb, or that doesn't really make sense, or that's a little random. But it's not really a show that's supposed to be super in-depth either, so it's hard to really criticize a show for what I want it to be, because I watch all these other shows that are a lot more clever with their writing. In this case, this guy, friend of Casey, and she fully believes he's innocent. Well, in some other shows, it may turn out that he's not. But in NCIS, I know, because of how much they're hammering it home, everybody else on the team is like, there's so much evidence against him, he has to have done it. He had a motive. There's evidence against him. The murder weapon was at his home. Any other show, I'd be like, I don't know. I mean, maybe they're going to do a little plot twist and he's actually going to be guilty, in case he's going to have to deal with the fact that he did trick her and he did lie to her. But because this is NCIS, I know it's going to be by the books. They're going to find the evidence. Gibbs is seeing the little, oh, why would he hide his murder weapon next to a dog if he really loved his dog? Like, that doesn't make sense. They're noticing the little things that don't quite add up, and then they find the one piece of evidence that's like, oh, Ellie just heard a call, and that's what suddenly proves that he's innocent. Just because that's NCIS, that's what they're going to do. So, is it a crime on the show that it's not meeting expectations of other shows that are much better? Or is it like, well, that's what NCIS is. It's just supposed to just kind of be there, not challenge you too much, not make you think a whole lot. Just, here's the crime, here's who everybody thinks the bad guy is, here's who everybody thinks the bad guy is, here's the actual bad guy, and here's the one piece of evidence that wrapped everything up nice and neat. Doesn't really work like that in real life, but it's kind of, I guess, what I've come to expect out of this show. So, didn't mean to ramble on that too much, but all in all, I mean, Casey, it was nice to see her outside of just sitting there, big grin, dancing, singing, and that's all her thing is being quirky. It was nice to actually see her emote in some other way than, I'm just excited to be here. But it's not like suddenly her character is just 10 times better. It's just, okay, well, there was something a little different for her. Cool. So yeah, I want them to, I don't know. Because at this point, I mean, any change in her character is going to be you're rewriting her. But man, they did not do a good job. Whether picking the actress or whether writing for Casey, something has gone wrong to where I am really frustrated having her on the team, and nothing is really changing my mind. Even this episode where there is something different, it's not like it's so amazing that I'm just like, oh, she's more interesting as a character now. It's like, okay, that was good, but there's so much else about her character that I'm still frustrated with, that I'm still not excited to see her show up in future episodes. So, anyways, that's it for me. So those are these 3 episodes of NCIS. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts on these 3 episodes? Let me know what we can talk about and discuss, all the good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe, future NCIS reviews, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.